Yes, this is be covered with the mainline sewer repair fund, which this project's well within the budget of. I don't have an exact number on what's in that right now, but we've got this and other projects planned.
Okay.
Stephanie, we were okay with the bidding procedures on this for the dollar amount? As long as it was under 100,000, is that where we had to cut off,
Can
or
I-
no? Go ahead.
Typically, anything horizontal infrastructure would be $40,000 threshold by Iowa, well, 50,000 by Iowa code, 40,000 by the city policy. That is based on the engineering estimate, not on the actual bid.
Okay. Okay.
If we did go out for bids again, it would have to be formal bidding and go through public hearing and whatnot ahead of time. So that also adds
Okay.
Right on.
to the extension of time.
Okay.
Thank you, Ryan. Resolution award, yeah, no doubt. Awarding contract for the 2016 Third Street and Washington Street parking deck repair project.
Okay, Third and Washington parking deck, I believe it was, Stephanie helped me, 2013 was when a project was supposed to occur to get that parking deck resealed. Came to my attention last fall, I'm not sure when. We put together a project for that. Problem is, it's not a matter of just resealing the parking deck. There's a few, I believe it's 5 broken post-tensioning tendons in that structure that need to be addressed. There's some surface patching that needs to occur. We went out for quotes based off horizontal infrastructure, $100,000 limit. Our cost estimate was $60,000. We received 2 quotes for the work, low bid being Western Specialty Construction at $64,337.20. The budget for the ceiling was $31,400, including engineering, so $28,544 for just the construction. The additional funding is gonna come from the 6th and Washington parking lot was in this year's budget to receive an overlay. The parking deck at 3rd and Washington is a much greater issue to be addressed.
The FY17 budget had that. So we're proposing to move
The
the
sixth.
funding. Yeah, the 6th in Washington. We're proposing moving that funding over to cover this one.
And then I'll have to take a look at that 6th and Washington Street parking lot issue. When Eric and I were walking with Energy Efficient, one of the things, if you go back through budgets, that parking lot budget jumped this year because it came to our attention that we have an intake there that goes into our sanitary sewer. When I was walking.
At 6th and Washington?
Yeah, there's one intake in the southeast corner that ties into our sanitary sewer. There's no storm sewer nearby. However, looking at and I budgeted for replacing that and installing some storm line down to our nearest storm sewer. Looking at the lot while we were walking with Energy Efficient, it appears that we can probably just eliminate that intake, which will save a good amount on the replacement of the intake and the storm pipe.
So,
Most of the water there appears to not make it to that intake anyway.
so we may be able to bid that project out still.
Yes.
The potential is that it will come in a lot lower than what you had originally budgeted. Probably not low enough that we have an even wash, but
But
at
it's
least
still covering most of-
it's
majority
fairly
of it.
close.
We'll take a look and see what we can do.
Okay. You guys good?
Good.
All right.
Thank you, Ryan.
Presentation, Apollo site, Stephanie Stevens. Stephanie Archibald. He was everybody's teacher at one point in time. This guy.
Okay, thank you so much for allowing me to come here and present this. I really feel, Eric knows I'm probably ready on my email, pretty strongly about this. Okay. You can go on to the next one. Okay, so the establishment of Apollo School of the Arts is to provide opportunities for the youth of Burlington and surrounding areas to learn, explore, and participate in the performing and fine arts. And then also to rehabilitate a part of Burlington's history in such a way that alumni, prior staff, and the community is proud of. And then, as you'll see, like the little page numbers underneath on the slide, but that would go to the page numbers in there. You can go to the next slide.
Slow.
Is it going? Oh. Yeah.
I'm gonna do like my daughter does, wait for it, wait for it.
It's working?
There you go.
Okay, so why is School of the Arts? You know, there's cuts in funding for the arts in academic schools, and it just always seems like that's the area that gets hit the most. Keep the youth involved in something positive, to be a part of something much bigger, more than video games. You know, I see that in my own kids too. So, maintaining the importance of the performing and fine arts, provide guidance and expertise, provide opportunities for collaboration on projects of a larger scale. And, you know, it's not just where you could teach somebody to play guitar and somebody else to play the drums, but to make something bigger. You know, you've got them in the same establishment, and they could, you know, write a song, form a band, you know, cut a record, whatever it would take. Guide students on their desired career path with support throughout the process. So if you've got people that are in acting and theater, you know, you can find those auditions for them and just keep working even past, you know, the school part of it. The goals is to acquire and preserve the building, of course, and then, you know, to establish the school, be a nonprofit status, the board of directors, hire trained personnel, and instruct and inspire students, which would create job opportunities. You would have a full-time person on the ground at all times, taking care of the building and the grounds and everything, and then somebody full-time that would be, you know, phones, enrollment, things like that, and then of course your instructors. And then of course enrollment, scholarships, you know, we would be able to get the money, raise the money for scholarships for students who show need also. And then the rationale, provide the best location with the greatest amount of space to house the school and numerous classes it would offer, and yet still allow room to grow within its walls. You know, I feel like the school is a really good size, and you'll see later on in some of the sketches, you know, how many rooms that this proposal actually takes up. We want to keep the current floor plan and renovate the entire school. So I don't want to move any walls, break down any walls or anything like that. I want to restore the whole school as it was. Of course, not as it was in 1908 because there's been the admission put on, but definitely as it was in the 1930s, something like was added. The auditorium for events, plays, concerts, recitals, poetry readings, and I would hope that that would be numerous events throughout the year. Gymnasiums for dance, library for academic assistance, and an art gallery located in the basement. There's, you know, from the floor plans. I didn't venture down into the basement when I went with the contractor. It got a little dark and kind of eerie down there. We went about just a little ways, but the lights were not cutting through the darkness very well. So, and there would be classrooms for the numerous art, theater, and music classes. It's a great location. It's close to downtown. And of course Apollo is the Greek god of music and poetry, so it's like almost meant to be. Rationale for goal 2, provide a platform for students to explore and foster talent, provide opportunities for students to collaborate, avenues for students to be successful in their career, give them the same opportunities as people in the larger cities, and then work directly with the community arts establishment. I think that's really important to always work together. You know, I don't want to take away from anybody. I want to work with everybody. So, of course, the target group is the youth of Burlington and surrounding areas, but I really would love to have the adult classes as well, adult dance and art classes too. Okay, so here's some of the opportunities for youth. You know, we would have, it would be known as Apollo School of the Arts, but yet it would have several different schools within it. Apollo School of Dance, Apollo School of Music, Apollo School of Theater, and Apollo School of Art. And these are the various things that we would want to offer. And then also the Power School of Academic Assistance, because, the last thing I would want is somebody to spend evening hours, learning dance and music and then not doing what they need to do in the academic school. So I would want to, work directly with the school, the academic schools, to make sure that they're always maintaining at least a 3.0 grade point average, but preferably higher. Peer assistance, and private tutoring, and that would be more in the library area at the school. Some of the additional goals, with, like I said, those adult dance, art classes, music classes, dance aerobics. Aerobics are kind of boring unless you're doing it to a well-known song or something that's on the radio and everything, so that's always a lot easier. The school museum, from the Burlington High School through, as it was known as Apollo, 1909 to 1983. And I think that, was the middle school and then it was an alternative school as well. So anything that we could collect and store in there so people could, open to the public, people could still do that kind of stuff as well. Art gallery, of course, and a recording studio. I think that's really important if you're going to teach a lot of music, whether it's voice or instruments. Give them the opportunity to do something with it. And then possibility for like preschool or daycare with a focus on the arts, and their plays, concerts, recitals, and poetry readings. And then there was I don't remember it, but my parents do, a little diner called Gibby's that was right
Across the street.
So, there was that thought of maybe down in Petcher area, having like a Gibby's too, put in there, so, which would be open to the public as well, so. Okay, it's on page 4 if you want to see it a little clearer, but that would be the basement floor plan, and you can see, how many rooms, this would be like the music end of it, because, they're louder than the rest of them, so they would have to be done in those cement walls. It takes up a lot of room. First floor, that takes up most of the first floor there. And there's just various different classes, dance classes will be, of course, in the gyms and everything. And then the second floor, where we would have the academic assistants, and then you've got the art classes and stuff. It's really beautiful from the second floor, looking down on Burlington there, so. Okay, the benefits of the community and the neighborhood, the school would have additional lighting outside, security cameras inside and outside, it would be well manicured. Community service projects, we would hope to offer community service projects to the students. Close access to the school, if you're in that local neighborhood, it would give you very close access. Restoration of the original high school, job opportunities, and of course the youth involvement, which is our major focus there. Okay, so my contractor, when he walked through with me, he kind of estimated, and he said this is just really rough estimate, that it could be about $10 million to renovate that entire building. Due to the fact that the floor plan will remain the same, it could be lower than quoted. A lot of anybody else that may be going in there for some other reason may have to tear down a lot of walls and everything. We would have to do the same thing with, replacing wiring and plumbing and the HVAC system and stuff as anybody else would, but we would eliminate tearing down walls. Other possibilities for lowering the cost would be, volunteers or, independent builders or something that would donate time and resources. It's something that we would kind of seek. The plan would be to get on the state historical registry, and I have no doubt that would definitely happen. The reason I say that is the Hotel Burlington was constructed by the same architects, and so was the post office and courthouse there in Davenport, and both are on the National Historic Registry. So, and then get on the National Historic Registry, nonprofit status, apply for the grants, Historic Arts and Humanities, Energy, Brownfield, Grayfield, private grants and funding. I do have 2 other grant writers that are willing to work for the cause also. We would want to work directly with the Economic Development Main Street Program and take part in tax increment financing or tax incentives that we could get. Donor recognition, I feel like this is this is probably my favorite part of it, the brick fundraiser, of course, I put that at the top. You know, people that attended this school could purchase a brick, and we would want to pave the front walkway and the back walkways with bricks that would honor either students or teachers, you know, anybody that had something to do with the school. And it would be a permanent honor there, so. Also a donor wall, right when you first walk in the building, we would like to have a donor wall put up. Designated area is more, large-scale donations. What's unique about this building is that, you know, you can name any room, anything in there after whoever donated, you know. And so you'll see in another slide that there's different levels, you know, if you donate at one level, you could have that room in your honor, and then the hallway, maybe you would have a hallway in your honor, or whatever, the auditorium, depending on how much was donated. Social media, of course, that would be, a big thing also. Website donations and recognitions. I haven't published the website, but I do have, the website with ApolloSchoolofTheArts.org, already, so, and then of course, business advertising on the website and the school, whatever. Okay, and then there's, the designated area thing, kind of colored, you could probably say it better in the proposal, where you would, at different levels, be able to donate, different amounts and have that one mark on it. And then, of course, there's the possible funding. I don't have the amounts beside it, and I was talking to Eric earlier about this. You know, some of the grants that I've looked into, and there is a grant section in the back of the proposal, some of them don't have a cap. You know, I was looking at one, grant possibility, they had donated $10 million to an establishment. Of course, it was a much larger establishment, but there was no cap on, you know, whatever you were asking for. It was whether we would get it or not. So I didn't put the amount of money, but I will talk about, you know, some other projects that was able to raise a lot of money. Maybe not 10 million, but at this scale, I'm sure there are others that have raised that kind of money. Of course, the Brownfield workforce credits, Brownfield Greenfield credits, donations, fundraisers, tax increment payments, and private funding and backing as well. Okay, so that's kind of repeating myself. I'm working with the economic development and arts-based community, and of course, I would like the building to be green, you know, up to green building standards. Some of the similar restoration projects in Iowa, the Warren Cultural Center in Greenfield, which is very close to where I teach, that was a $6.2 million project. And beautiful place, not anything as far as offering like what this school would offer, but they were able to raise the money in grants and everything they needed. Union Block, I'm sure you're probably familiar with, maybe, they raised in grants and funding $3.9 million. I don't know what the Burlington Capitol Theater, but I'm sure that was a big expense as well, trying to restore it. And then the Templeton Center, they converted a school, just like what I would want to do, but it was not a school that is in this kind of disrepair. It was more one that they had just came out of. So, but they were able to raise some money to make it into a community center. And of course, the preservation, restoring the original high school will not only be preserving a piece of Burlington's history, but writing a new chapter for the city. Architecture was designed with attention to detail and function, and should be preserved in a manner that retains that character. It's not only the intention of the School of the Arts to provide a platform for youth today to explore the arts, but to honor the past 9 educators who attended or worked at the school in a way that they would be proud of. And in closing, due to the project's nature and focus and the benefits of the project would bring to the city through youth enrollment, job opportunities, and historic preservation, it's our hope that the city would be willing to work together with us on a plan to help make the Apollo School of the Arts into something that the city of Burlington will be proud of. I know that's the last slide, but I do want to mention that there are a couple other things in the proposal. On page 12 or 13, there's some of the grants and funding that I looked into, and of course, every time I search grants, whether it be Iowa grants or national grants, just executive ones keep popping up, and I would, of course, be applying for everything that I could, or we could, I guess. And then, on page 14 to 15, after I walked through the building, I had taken, of course, the contract was something I took, and I said, this might be some light reading for you at another time, but something that I had started, several weeks after I got through it, just kind of a beginning, if this were to begin and start to get off the ground and restoration would happen, I would definitely like to put everything into a book form with pictures of how we transformed something that seemed to have been, not taken care of in a way, into something that would potentially be great, for the city and for the youth. So, any questions?
I like how you roll, kid.
I think big.
Well,
You might as well. There's no small,
No, my
Yeah.
mom says, she's here with me today, she says, you don't do things small at all, do you? I said, no, not when I see that vision, you'll see in the reading, I'm not blaming her at all. She's the one that mentioned, you want to restore something, why don't you just buy that school, that old high school, and restore it? And I said, what? I didn't even know that it was up for sale. So, of course.
we got a few more buildings too, Mom. Keep the party going,
One building at a time. So yeah, it's definitely something that I've thought about nonstop, and of course, had contacted immediately. It seemed like within a matter of days of visiting back home, that I was emailing and calling and really trying to get my plan together, so. Is there any questions, anything I left out, or?
Your brother Shane would be so proud.
Oh my gosh. He definitely talks to me about it all the time. He actually is pretty excited that if I could get this going, he would be back and, helping out with the project, I'm sure.
but
So,
you're looking at it as a nonprofit, as the owner, quote,
I
the
don't
owners.
feel like what I would want to, I want to benefit for something that I want to help. I want to help the youth of Burlington and the community and surrounding communities too, but I don't feel like financially benefiting from that when it's more of a cause, than anything. So I definitely want it to be a nonprofit organization. I think that, you can always, as far as running the school, there could be tuitions and things like that that would go into it, charging for the events, but it would always go back into the school and the students.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like a really, really nice idea. You've got a lot in here and a lot of thought and effort put into it already.
I do have a picture, she can hold of what it would kind of look like. Obviously, I don't know if you can see the bricks and everything, it would be well manicured. It's just a sketch, but one of many that are at home right now. But it would definitely make that area a lot nicer, a lot brighter. A lot of people, I think it would just make that area a lot busier.
Yeah, Mr. Davidson taught at that school back in, he taught everybody in Burlington at that school.
All the years that it was the ninth grade, that's probably when you were there.
I didn't actually get to go to this school. Did you teach at the high school? Okay, definitely the high school.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't get to go to this school, and I was very upset in middle school when I found out that, we're not gonna get to go there.
Yeah.
We have to go out to the new building, and I had always loved this school as a kid, so.
Yeah, the students that were there loved it too, I'm telling you, and we as teachers did also.
I enjoyed it, 6th and 7th grade. Stephanie, thank you so much. You've given us a lot to think about, and I'll tell you what, I sure hope something does happen with that building. I love your idea. I think it's fantastic.
Thank you.
And this makes me want to get in touch with my creative side, so.
Yeah, well, you're welcome. If you approve it, you're welcome to.
Yeah, right.
Thank you very much.
Good to see you again, Steph.
Good to see you.
Chief?
Council members.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry that I have to say this, but you have had 3 different proposals brought to you on this structure.
Yes.
2 of which are more viable than the third from my perspective. And the only reason I say that is that you had one developer come and say, I'll do exactly what that guy said,
Yeah.
except with someone else.
Except for someone else.
He just didn't make a great presentation at that time. But it's two different ways of doing a project and two different potential uses for this structure. The other individual that made a presentation had a time frame to try to put together something to, if he was gonna go after multiple sources yet this year, which needs to be fairly soon. And so you have to make a decision, which way do you really kind of wanna go? Is it one of these two ways? Is it a third thing that you wanna go after to try to see happen with that facility? But this is a decision that comes down to you as the policy group. And I really don't have a tremendous amount to offer to you for being able to make an evaluation, because these are two very different perspectives on what to think about for structure. You have to think about what do you think is the most viable use for that facility as you move forward, and where do you feel that the city can be in a risk position when you know you're ultimately the backstop on this structure.
Thanks, Jim.
I'm sure you don't have. I'm sure you don't have an answer on that for this evening.
No.
But ultimately,
I'd like to get a lot more public input. I mean, it's basically about what everyone in town wants.
so what kind of structure would you like to see? A hearing held?
I don't know, I guess what.
No?
Just
Uh,
a
well-
chance for you all to go out and speak with folks about it and see which way you're hearing from?
I've talked to different people about it. I haven't had anybody, talking about going a different route. Pretty much what I've heard was, if you have an investor that you think that can make it happen, make it happen. That's what I'm getting. So, I will acquiesce. Counsel?
I've had several people tell me, Bob, tear it down.
Really?
Oh, yes,
Wow.
That's a popular opinion.
yes. Because the economics of revitalizing that building, from a financial standpoint, is awesome. I mean, that doesn't mean that the ideas presented to put apartments in there or the art center aren't good ideas. It's the practical application of these ideas. And there are many people, I'm one of them, who's sitting here thinking, where's all this money coming from? And I know about grants and so forth, but it's challenging, to say the least. And I don't want to appear negative. I'd love to see the building eventually be restored to its beauty before. I guess I'm not very optimistic. Shame on me.
No,
No, I mean,
I
that's-
have to concur, and I have a semi-emotional attachment to that building, only because it was there, I spent 14 years of my teaching career in that building.
My mother graduated from there, by the way.
But, times are different,
Yeah.
so.
Okay, well, we don't have to make the call.
You don't
right
have to
now,
make a
so-
call now, but I'm sure that you're anxious to know what route's going forward on this. The other developer is very anxious time-wise, that if he's gonna have something that has a realistic chance of even being considered this year, that decision needs to be made quickly.
And his approach, of course,
His
is
ap-
almost solely on getting
His
grants.
approach is solely on putting together, well, it involves financing too, bank financing too, but he needs to have the credits, and grant funds in order to make the project work. And, I don't know how realistic his chance is of getting a project that's viable.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you have two different routes to go, and which one do you want to take the time to pursue at this point? You don't have to make a decision tonight, but you do have to make a decision fairly quickly.
Well, I definitely I would think that we would be able to come up with a decision.
Oh, yeah.
What about should we put it on the agenda for the first meeting in May, and we're gonna have something decided then? Or?
I'm satisfied
Yeah.
with next week, but,
That's what I was
Yeah, well, the other, I know,
because
I don't know
want
what
to
your,
hold anybody
I don't
up.
know what your timeframe is. I know the other developers, it needs to get it done quickly.
Right, so
He
that's
needs
why
to
I
know
was
yes or
thinking
no really quickly.
Next
Okay,
week.
Are you guys satisfied with?
By the fall, some of the.
You have a little bit more time for what you're trying to get accomplished.
Yeah, the brownfield breakup grants and credits need to be done by the fall, so you can be approved for next year. So those
Yeah.
would be, important, but I would, a lot of the grants for this year have already kind of gone,
Mhm.
so it's still, there's still.
Do you
time
guys-
to-
I don't care. Whatever works.
I was good with next week, actually, so I'll leave that up to the
I'll,
council. you know.
I'd want to hear that others are comfortable making proceeding with considering a decision.
May.
You're at this next meeting, otherwise it'll be the following meeting that will have it on. I want you all to take the time to make sure that you feel comfortable with what you're going to
I
decide.
think the first meeting in May, my preference.
Yeah, I think that's probably a little bit better than next week.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the meantime, I know that Eric and I are scheduled to have a conversation with the other developer just in terms of what he needs to have timing wise, I guess, later this week,
Okay,
so.
okay.
All right.
Thank you again, Stephanie, for coming down. Appreciate you taking the time. Chief?
Thank you, I know it's been a long evening, so we'll, just kind of
Really?
move right
What'd you say?
We'll keep moving, Bob.
Really? Got me at the right time or the wrong.
Thank you, Eric. So the police department annual report for 2015, the first thing, the picture, we always really work really hard to find a picture that really truly represents the department for the past year and really what we're trying to accomplish as a department. And what we're trying to accomplish is to be very community oriented. We want to build partnerships, and this was a picture of the honor guard that was presenting down the night they opened the new stadium. I mean, what a great thing for the community.
Yes.
And to have, being able to put an honor guard in place that could show up and do that is something that we're really proud of. The honor guard, or at least a couple members, also represented us in Des Moines a couple weeks ago when the unfortunate incident happened up there at the death of a couple officers. So it's important to us that we have this honor guard in place, and it was a big accomplishment as we're going forward in 2015. So that's enough about the picture, but I just wanted to explain to you that we just don't put any picture on the front of the annual report, so. Thank you. Eric? Just briefly, the organizational chart, and what I really just kind of want to focus on here so we can, in thought of all the time that's been taken up this evening, but I wanted to get you updated on our probationary officers and the status of those officers. And if you look over to the far left, it's kind of color-coded up to the top right, but Aaron's, Bolts, and Mixer, those three, if you remember, we had 4 that started through that process. Well, unfortunately, one of those didn't work out, so we ended up with 3. But the exciting news about the 3 we have, they're finishing up the FTO program today and tomorrow. So they're going to be assigned. If you look over to the right, then you'll see what squads those officers are going to be assigned to. And they're ready to get a set of keys and hit the streets. I mean, we're a ways away from being where we want to be with them, but we're excited, they're excited. And
I was
so-
just curious, say, that went by quick. I know it didn't for you, though, but.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it, but yeah, there they are.
Good
And
deal.
so, then in the green, you see, William and Kelsey, and I just attended their graduation Friday at the ILAA. So they have successfully completed the academy, and they're starting into the FTO process, which, and as we get into the annual report, we're kind of changing some things in that process that they're gonna have to go through, and it's all for the better. And then just one more quick thing, I want you to focus on the 2 pop unit officers, because we're gonna try to launch that June 1st. Now, when we do that, I mean, the plan got mixed up a little bit when one of the officers didn't make it through the program, but we're gonna proceed with that. It's tough to work, as Councilman Wilson found out, it's tough to work with 5 on a squad, but we're gonna do that for a while until Reddick and Cricket are ready. To this pop unit thing, as we we're gonna try to reduce gun violence. I mean, that's our number one priority for 2016. So we gotta get this program going. And we're gonna sacrifice a little bit from the patrol division, plus we're under the cops grant, and that's part of our grant. That's why we got $250,000, was to get this program launched. So we're trying to find that balance there, you know, and how do we best utilize our personnel. So, and I'll get into that a little bit deeper, but that's why I wanted to show you the chart, kind of where we're at with the overall employment numbers at the police department. And we're gonna have a scheduled retirement in August. So hopefully, in the August academy, we'll have 2 more to send into that academy. Because, I mean, technically, we're 1 short again right now. So, and with a retirement, that puts us 2 short. It's like we can never, ever get ahead of the curve, but, I mean, we're obviously putting our best foot forward and trying to do that. It sure be nice to maybe attract some certified people. That's something else we're
Yeah.
also working on really hard. That'd be a big deal. Eric? So I just wanna highlight a few things on this. In the number 1 bullet point there, we have increased our abandoned vehicle enforcement by 9% over 2014. And so, with the number of abandoned vehicles we worked and the number of abandoned vehicles that was towed, that was up almost 10%. And I know that's been a big priority of the council, that we try to clean up the city as best we can. We got a long way to go. But I wanna let you know that for 29 hours a week, we've changed some priorities, and that's where we're trying to focus our priorities. And it did work. We did have an increase. I'd love to see that 20 or 25%, but one bite of the apple at a time.
Amen.
Now you go down a little bit further, we're really proud of the fact of our minority recruitment committee. We've worked very diligently on this. We need a diverse police department. There's no getting around it. And how do we do that? You know, we just had a job fair. We took a step in the right direction. We had, 9 intent to test forms taken. We've already had 1 application come back. You go, well, what's 1 application? Well, that's 1 more than we had.
That's right.
And that's how I look at that. And then the city manager and I had a really interesting conversation. Okay, now if we start to get some applicants, let's make sure that we can provide some type of assistance in a training type program to make sure that we can pass the state standard. You have to understand that we as a police department don't set those standards. Those standards are set. So, but we know the standards, and for the first year, believe this or not, Standard and Associates, they're in control of all the written testing. They came out with a thing called a study guide, can you imagine that? And a practice test. So I have access to that now. So as this moves forward, I think that's a real important part of what we're trying to do. Is to maybe work with some of our applicants, all applicants, if they wanna have kind of some insight on what this testing process is about. So, that was a big deal to us. 77.8% voter approval for a new police department. I thought that spoke volumes of the
Amen.
community.
That was huge.
This council, the city manager, and all the support staff that supports the Burlington Police Department, it was huge, and that's something we were really, really proud of. I've already touched on, but we got $250,000 for the cops grant. Again, that's a big deal. It's gonna help fund a couple positions that we never would have had. We couldn't have budgeted for to do that. So that's kind of exciting. And again, that is to form the problem-oriented policing unit in an effort to reduce gun violence. And I got a little bit more on that as we go. And we got 2 officers that are in uniform now. 1 officer is working about 40 hours a month, which is incredible for a volunteer. And the other one's doing a fantastic job. We got 3 more that are in training. So hopefully we're just a few months away to maybe having 5 uniforms on the street that we didn't have and never would have. So kudos to those guys. This is a crazy difficult job in today's society, but we got some people in this community that are willing to do it to help the community. So that's awesome. And I thank them dearly. Just very briefly, the reason I bring this to your attention, we kind of talk about this every year, but if you kind of look at year 25 of service, which is clear to the far right, and then you have 25, 26, 27, 28. Well, if you add those up, there's 10 people that are gonna be retiring in about 5 years. So, as we move forward in the department, it's important that we succession plan and make sure that we have people that are in positions to fill these upcoming positions, and that's a big priority of the current management team. Are we making sure that we have people in place that can step into these positions and do the job? That's, I think, probably one of our biggest responsibilities as leaders in the organization, to make sure that's happening. So just to point that out to you, that we're well aware of what's coming and what we're trying to do about it. And I talked about this briefly, but if you look between like years 11 and 16, right now that's probably not that big of a deal, but eventually,
Yeah.
10 years from now,
It's gonna be the same.
that's where it's gonna be, and we have this big gap. We don't have any tenure there. And so again, I think it's important that we look for certified people with experience that can start to fill some of these gaps.
Yep.
I talked about it last year. Unfortunately, we didn't get any of those people hired, but just so you know, that's something that we're thinking about and trying to plan for the future of the organization.
And so how do you make that attractive? How do you do that?
Well, we've did a couple things with the permission of the city manager. I mean, we're gonna move them immediately to step C in the pay plan versus they don't have to start at beginning pay.
Good.
And during these, recent negotiations, we talked about moving their seniority in for
Yeah.
pay as well. So if they had 15 years in another department, they wouldn't be starting at ground zero one, at least for pay. Now granted, for vacation and those other things,
Yeah,
they
that's
would.
good.
And we've talked about off and on, depending on the applicant, a type of signing bonus. I mean, you gotta remember, our academy costs, just the raw costs alone are $7,000 plus the time. I mean, the contract they currently sign right now is about a $19,000 or $20,000 contract. So to offer some incentive, whether that's $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, I mean, I think that's a big deal, and I think
agree.
that really, really helps. Now, maybe not all applicants are created equal with that said.
Right.
So,
Well,
but that's a discussion that we've had.
I'm glad you're doing that. That's good.
Thank you. Eric? I just like to point this out, and I really needed to make a better comparison of this because these numbers have grown and grown and grown in the last 10 years of the police organization, which I think is really, really important, that we're getting people with post-high school education. I mean, as you can see, over half the department now has a 4-year degree. You know, since I've been in police administration in 2007, I don't think we've hired anybody without a 4-year degree. So, I mean, I think it's important that the community understands that it's important in today's world to look for the education and the maturity that comes with that education. Just a quick tidbit here on our contact hours and citizen in attendance. It looks like it's down just a tick, but we had 36 people. I mean, for all of 2015, we were pretty much at 36 patrolmen, and so that's why, and you're gonna see some other things that are coming up here in these statistics, and you have to remember when your force is down about 13–14%, you know, it has more than just an effect on that, because you got fewer people on the streets answering just as many calls for service. So, with that said, I mean, and obviously you notice 2012 there, and we tried to make an asterisk. For whatever reason, that year they decided when we did Operation Lifesaver, they kept track of everybody that attended that training during Steamboat days. Well, I mean, obviously that kind of skewed what we were really trying to keep track of, so I just want to make sure we point that out. Our top 10 calls for service, and this is another really important point I want to make. Our top call, 22% of our calls, is suspicious person and vehicle. And prior to that, it has always been animal calls. Now granted, they still make up 16% of what we're doing, but if you remember back in 2012, we discussed this and said somehow we gotta start to reduce these animal calls.
Yeah, man.
Well, we got a guy that's really working really hard, and we got some outreach programs at the shelter that we didn't have, and so I think that's working. But more importantly, suspicious person calls are up, and that is a great thing to me. I mean, we're really preaching, the nationwide preaching, you see something, you say something. In public, if you're listening, it doesn't matter to us. If you see something that you don't like, it's out of place, you think it's out of place, call us. If it's out of place, we'll deal with it. If it's not, we'll go on about our day, but we knew about it. And that's working. I mean, those calls are up 3 or 4%, which is a really good deal for us in the community, so thank you for that. Just a quick comparison, this is all of Des Moines County, but just to give you an idea of the number of calls for service that come into dispatch, kind of where police, fire, ambulance, the percentages of who takes those calls for service. Go ahead, Eric. And then this just breaks it down one notch further for the law enforcement agencies that are involved with the Burlington, West Burlington, and Des Moines County. And you can clearly see that we make up a majority of that, but obviously we have a majority of the population, so.
32,000 or 33,000 calls.
Yes, sir.
That's just hard to comprehend.
Yeah, and those numbers are even down just a little bit. But that's a lot of calls. I mean, when you start thinking about it.
Normally it doesn't look like that. It's a lot higher.
That's a lot of calls.
All right.
Yeah, the traffic citations issued. Again, this is twofold. You know, you see this number going down. And when I looked through the actual citations that were issued, I mean, again, we got 26 or 36 guys working that where 41 normally would be. But more importantly, like our traffic safety grant is cut in half. We get half of what we did for funding to fund somebody. They go, hey, when you come in, you're working traffic, and that's all you're doing. You don't have to answer calls for service. But thirdly, and probably most importantly, I mean, I got the message loud and clear when I became the chief of police that let's focus on causation. In other words, we're just not gonna sit somewhere and write somebody a ticket for 10 over just to write somebody a ticket for 10 over. I mean, are we having accident problems there? Are we having stop sign problems there? Are we having school bus violations there? Are we having speed in school zones a problem? And so that's what we do. We focus that on causation. And I've seen it change, which to me is a really, really good thing in what we're trying to accomplish. I've seen our ratio really change to warnings to citations, which, if you get the message, that's all we're trying to do. That's all we're trying to do. So, and you'll see as we go through here that program's pretty much staying on track. And this just gives you a little breakdown of the citations and the citations that are issued. The only thing I highlighted in 2015, which is really impressive to me, and that was the operating while intoxicated. I mean, we see this number go down, 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 and again, which is on another one of my slides coming up, we went 2015 without an alcohol-related fatality in the community.
Praise God.
And I think we're 5 or 6 years running now.
Praise
So,
God.
with education and some enforcement, I think it's really, really working, and that's a number I think the whole community can be proud of. That's a
I'll
really,
tell you what,
really
you gotta
low
love those
number.
numbers. You gotta love that.
That's a low number, so, yeah, we were proud of that. And then here's a touch a little bit on that causation of motor vehicle accidents. Citations are down for probably those 3 reasons I explained, but when you look at this, our motor vehicle accidents really haven't changed. As a matter of fact, our injury accidents are even down 2 from last year. Property damage accidents are just up just the slightest tick. But you look at the fatalities across the bottom. I mean, like I said, that's something we're really, really proud of. So there's a correlation between traffic enforcement and accidents, but when you focus on causation, you can accomplish the same thing with not near as many ticks. And I think that that's just, as we try to change our culture and as we try to police the way this council and the city manager wants us to police, I think that it's playing out and it's working just like I think that was set forward to me to try to make it work. So, I mean, we're really proud of that those numbers haven't got away from us.
So before I forget, I want to thank you for your leadership then. So,
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And so, did you get it, Eric? Thanks. Well, you're good. You just know right where we're going with this. So, the calls for service, and I don't want you to be confused because there's 3 different things we're going to talk about. The calls that come into the dispatch center and then calls that actually require a police response. And so that's what you're looking at here. This number that's over 30,000 actually required a police response. And so, but I like to go back and look and go, okay, well, if we had 30,000 and we had 33,000, where was the difference? Then the animal calls were down 250, and criminal history checks are down 1,100, and that was just simply how they are processed. Before, for a warrant entry, almost every warrant entry got what's called a CFS, or a number assigned to that when we run a criminal history, so when we get audited, we can take that number to that criminal history. Well, when Johnny took over DESCOM, he's got a really thorough understanding of NCIC, and he said, whoa, 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 all these don't require these checks and these numbers. And so he has reduced that by 1,100. So
Good.
that was a large part of why you see the difference in what we just talked about.
So, just real quick, I mean, besides what you just said, what else is the difference from the
Traffic
2,000?
stops.
Okay,
Traffic
okay.
stops were down by, I think, and I didn't get these exactly verbatim, but it was around 2,000 for traffic stops alone. And again, that's something to say for, one, you don't have enough guys to use your traffic safety money, and three, causation.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
next slide.
Look at the animal thing.
Still too high.
And I didn't incorporate all the, you'll see in here that we got all the call types mentioned, and I didn't put slides on all those, that's just something you can take the time to digest. I'm sure.
I want to talk to you later in private, Chief. God bless you.
Gonna like that part of it. So, we'll move right on to incidents. And And an incident is actually what required a police report in either what we call UCR, Uniform Crime Reporting, or IBR, Incidents-Based Reporting. So that's where that number is different than the calls for service. I mean, obviously, not every call we go on requires a report, or is what is determined to be a reportable incident. So again, you can look at that number, it's down just a tick, and as I looked back, I mean, burglaries were down a little bit, and disorderly conducts were down substantially. But again, 203 of these incidents less, if you will, were from those warrant entries. So really, when you start to look at that, our incidents were probably about the same. It was just a matter of what got assigned in 2015 and going forward versus what got assigned in 14. So, and again, you can look through those all the numbers that come attached with that when you have time on your own. Use of force, this is something we track, obviously, and keep really close tabs on this. We look at every use of force incident. Every one is reviewed by a committee within the organization. We look at the videotapes if there happen to be for that. And keep in mind, the use of force, what we count as a use of force is if we basically have to even put our hand on somebody. If we've asked you and asked you and asked you to do something, eventually we're gonna get to the point of going, hey, you need to put your hand behind your back, and we have to touch you to do that. There's gonna be an incident report filed on that, so keep that in mind. But something that's really important when you look down at the narrative section, and it talks about the national average for use of force, 1.4% of police contacts with the public. Well, last year we were at 1.2%, but that's of the physical arrests we made. If I were to compare that number 21 against the number of contacts that we have, our contacts are in the tens of thousands. That percentage wasn't, I don't even know if it would register without triple digits as a percentage. So, I mean, we're crazy happy about that and really excited about that, that the organization can, make 1,659 arrests over a course of 5,200 incidents and have 21 that required an incident, a use of force type incident.
Pretty impressive, I think.
That's better for you guys and for the public too.
It's better for everybody,
Yeah.
absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely. I think we're down to the last slide, and again, this is the arrest per year. And if you go back, it's real comparative to the incidents. When you look at the percentage of incidents, how they change, you're gonna see almost that percentage of arrests change. Because most of your arrests are generated from incidents. So if incidents are down a tick, arrests are gonna be down a tick. And with that said, I think the guys and gals are really, really patient. Is there another solution to this, a permanent solution?
great.
How can we solve this problem versus you going to jail, you getting out of jail, and starting all over again?
Yeah.
There's plenty of that to go around currently. So the more we can reduce that, the better off we are. And it's really all about problem solving and trying to problem solve it on the long term.
Can I get that extra one too, so I can put that lead one in?
Yeah,
this box?
yeah, I'm sorry, yes, absolutely. But yeah, that'll, just about concluded. I just wanted to talk real briefly about our community outreach efforts, and you can look at those and read those yourself. But again, these pictures were selected for a reason. I mean, if you get to really looking at those pictures, you're gonna figure out real quick where our focus is. And our focus is on the children in this community, and that's the future. We got to instill values, and if it's not happening in the home, well then what can we do as a community to help that happen? Because everybody has goals, everybody has dreams, and if we can instill that as a value, then the last place we're gonna wanna end up is in jail, because we can't fulfill our goals. So that's where we're going as an organization. Our focus is on the children in the community, so. With that said, there's some goals, one more page for our 2016 goals. And again, you can review these yourselves, but just briefly, we're changing our FTO model to the San Jose model. And all that is gonna do for us, it added a lot of categories that we didn't have. Our task sheets stay the same, but the categories and how they're rated are gonna change a little bit. And we think it's important that we make sure we keep that very broad view over 23 categories versus 7 or 8 categories. So it took a lot of training to get the staff up to speed and the FTOs up to speed, but the 2 new recruits are gonna be the first 2 recruits to go through this. But this is a program that's really taken off in the big cities. And again, it's all about 21st century policing and the ideas that come from that. as part of this FTO program. So we want to instill those values right off the bat. So that's a change, that's something that we're definitely gonna get implemented and get moving on. Again, the POP unit to talk about reducing gun violence, and we're gonna use a problem-solving triangle. We're gonna strategically do some things that we haven't done, and we can get into more details with that later. I'm not trying to take up time, but digital radio, we talked about that on the radio the other day. But I think the word's finally really getting out there, and what we don't want to have happen when this is deployed about May 1st or late April, the people with current analog scanners are not gonna work. Now, there's some options, you can get apps on your phone, or you can stream it on the internet, or you can buy a digital-based scanner, and we want that. We wanna make sure people hear us. It's unbelievable the information we get from that. If we're in a foot pursuit, or we got a robbery or something going on, there's people calling us, hey, he just ran through my backyard, hey, and that's great information for us, and we want that to continue, so. And you can read the rest of them, but that's pretty much the conclusion. Any questions? I mean, again, I tried to take up the least amount of time I could here.
And I'm sorry you had to do that.
That's okay.
This is important to us as a community, so
I think we've got a great police department.
thank you.
I applaud your work, and I think the public is beginning to recognize this, because getting some favorable comments, which is,
Well, and as a comment back to the community, it's unbelievable. I don't know if I could get up and do this every day if it wasn't for the people and the people of this community and how they step up for the city and the police department. And it's all the time. It's every day. It's unbelievable.
Thank God.
I mean, we just started the canine thing. I already got like 14 grand.
really,
It's unbelievable. This town is
You
unbelievable.
got 14 grand on the canine?
Yeah, already. So yeah, that's going. That's up and running, and we're gonna make that happen too.
good.
That's really good to hear.
But thank each and every one of you for supporting
It's
that.
a tough job, chief, but somebody's gotta do it.
You're right.
I'm glad it's you and not me, brother. All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The police building progress.
Well,
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no.
really just wanted to make sure that, wow, we've changed the sound level in here. You didn't do anything? That's amazing, Art. We're looking at
Maybe
it,
it changes when we get to 7 o'clock.
it might,
Yeah.
barometric pressure, or, I don't know. We're looking at closure on a facility for May 4. It's tentative closing date to take over the US Bank building. Talked with the bank, and they gave a time frame, at least their initial estimate that they gave us when we talked with them this last week. They emailed back looking at taking out a building permit in July, groundbreaking in September, and a goal of being in a new facility by May of next year, which puts us on a spot where we need to get moving.
That's good news.
We're looking at going through, we've talked about getting a contract in front of you to hire James Estes to do the architectural work for the new facility. But we did want to look at the idea of a construction manager agent to do the actual construction side. We're looking at using a request for qualifications process on that. Have a tentative timeline with milestones between April 15 and June 3rd. I might, depending on what James Estes has, if he has some modifications on that. We may modify the milestones that are within there, but our goal would be to try to have by right about there, the beginning of June, someone to bring forward to do the construction management side. If there are one or two of you who would like to be part of that selection process as we do the interviews on the construction manager,
I'd like to do that.
Okay, go ahead, you guys.
Fantastic. That's great.
is that you two, Shane and
Yeah,
Bob?
I would love to be.
Yeah.
All right, well, I'll get you on, as we schedule the pieces that need to, really, we'll go through and get those firms who do express an interest in doing that service for us, we'll want to interview them. So that would be the spot where you two would get a chance to
Yeah.
be involved.
Boy, some of your boys was thinking they were never gonna get out of that old beat-up building, man. I'll tell you,
You're right about
I'm
that.
so glad that's a done deal.
You have to tell that guy you can't retire until, Until he gets his new digs, and then he can retire.
And I don't think there was anything else really with that process. Those are the major steps that need to occur here as we move forward. So,
Okay,
All
that's
right.
good news. That's moving quicker than I thought it might.
Thank you, Chief.
Yep, thank you.
it was, we were kind of pleased when they gave us a time frame that was a
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
12-month.
Great.
Well, does anybody have any issues with appointments?
You okay with us? Brandon Kipp is moving evidently, so
Yeah.
he's off the library board.
Oh.
Sorry, Brandon, but thank you, Brandon.
Yeah, I'll
So
tell you,
it's-
it was good while we had him. That's-
Martin
that's-
Salino Hug wants to go there, and Jerry Parks would like to be reappointed. That's the library board. The Parks Advisory, Mark Miller and Linda Arrow would like to be reappointed.
That makes sense to me.
They all sound good to me. Mr. Tislin, you got any closing remarks?
Earth Day, Saturday, 8:30 at the Port of Burlington.
It's gonna be a party. Councilwoman, do you have any closing comments?
No,
Oh. Do you have anybody here in the audience?
no.
All right. I have no comments. Mayor Pro Tem.
I know that you are not used to seeing me this casual, but I'm wearing this Hawkeye shirt today in honor of a good friend of mine, Dick Anderson, who decided to leave this earth on Saturday. And actually, his visitation I missed it, I'm sorry. His funeral's tomorrow morning, just a really, really neat, great person.
You went to work at Weingard with me.
Yeah.
Way
Remember
back.
him?
Al
Yeah.
Sorensen.
Yeah. So my sympathies to his family, and he'll be missed. He was a great Hawkeye fan, so that's why I'm wearing the Hawkeye
Amen,
sweatshirt.
amen.
And I'm black and gold. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't even, but
Councilman Fleming.
nothing to add at this time.
But you reserve the right. And I forgot to say, I just want to say thank you again to, I didn't get a chance to say this last week, Senator Courtney and Nancy, wonderful hosts. I appreciate it for inviting me 2 years in a row, and they didn't kick me out of Des Moines, so it was a good time. City Manager.
Housing.
Radio show?
Housing study, yeah, I was gonna mention a radio station Wednesday, 9 o'clock. Housing study tomorrow night,
5:30.
5:30 at the Chamber. One thing that didn't make it to the agenda that we tentatively plan on having on for next week, we have a tentative agreement that was being considered by AFSCME this evening. They should have taken a vote on it, so we'll find out if they approved that or not. If they did, we'll be bringing that, or adding that to the agenda. Terms would be fairly comparable to what you've seen in the other two contracts. So, and just to let you know, Stephanie and I get to be involved in a call with a bond attorney, I think, on Wednesday, and then Thursday is with the rating agency, Standard & Poor's, in regards to our bond issue. There's a couple of steps that are necessary as part of getting an official rating, and making sure that we have all our documents in order from a financial perspective when we do go out for bonding.
Fun.
Oh, it's all fun. It's a load of fun.
Fun.
That's all.
Okay. Bob, what should we do?
I think we should go home.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
So is somebody going with you? You going to the radio station?
Yes, sir.